Today we're covering financial services, which is a very wide topic, including a lot of professions. So we'll do that by kind of addressing it at a generic level, the different types of setups, such as kind of management defined work, if you are on a bigger team like a finance team, and then client type work. So where clients are requesting things to be done, or you have recurring work or retainers, things like that. I'll also briefly touch on client management, just to do with billing, which is particularly useful for accounting and bookkeeping type practices. Okay, yep. And then at the end, we'll go through any suggested use cases. If you do want to suggest a use case, please enter it in the Q&A section and just put use case at the top so that we know that that's something you want to have covered live. And the CS team will be collating those for me, and we'll try and get through a couple at the end if we can. We should be able to get through a few, hopefully. Please do include sufficient information so that I can understand what your process is and what outcomes are needed. So I can actually kind of show you a good way of doing it. Awesome. All right. Well, let's jump in then. So, yeah, what I'm going to go through today, I've got basically two spaces set up here. Client work would be what you'd kind of do if you were an accounting practice and you're doing jobs for individual clients. So it might be, you know, you're a tax accountant and you do work every year for your client list, or it could be that, you know, you're an advisory type firm and people have requests about, you know, asking you to advise on certain things. For finance, it's more to do with being on a part of a larger business. So you might be the CFO or one of the finance staff, kind of pulling reports, managing budgets, managing accounts, payable and receivable, that sort of thing. Okay, cool. So let's jump into client work first. So I've got a space here, and what I've done is I've organized each client as a folder. Now, this is not necessarily always the only way to do it or the best way to do it, but most of the time, for most people, it will be. A couple of other options are if you, say, had several services. For example, here we've got bookkeeping, advisory, tax returns. If a client only ever did one of these services, not several, then you could organize it by service at the folder level. But I think most of the time, clients will, you know, have several services that from you at the same time. So it's easier to organize by client first and then service. Okay, so I've got a few types of lists that I think might be useful here. The first is internal. So if you are sharing this whole folder with the client so that they can keep up with the work that you're doing for them, what I'd do is I'd go into the three dots here, go into sharing and permissions, and make this private. And then you invite your team who are going to be working with you on this, so that if you share the client as a guest on this folder, they won't be able to see this list. So yeah, we'll go into that a little bit more later perhaps. So the tasks in this list I would suggest are things that you're doing internally to either retain this client or invoicing them, or just things that they don't need to know about. So for example, here I've got some kind of helpful things to keep them with us. We're going to send them a welcome basket initially, a Christmas card at Christmas, and then we're going to do monthly check-in emails just to make sure everything's going okay, and a service level review every quarter. And we also have invoices that go out monthly. Next up, we've got our different services. So you might have several of these lists depending on what kind of services you offer and the various tasks that you're going to do for them as part of that. And that could either be as part of a retainer, it could be, you know, billed per hour, however you're doing that. You may, instead of doing an ongoing service, you might do individual projects, in which case you could have a list for each project. If you are doing retainers, one really decent way of doing it is to have a task for each block of hours. If you're doing retainers in terms of, you know, we'll do X things for you each month, then I'd call that recurring, and that's fairly standard. You just put a recurring due date on it. But if you are doing, say, you know, you pay for 10 hours and then you get to choose what those 10 hours are for over the length of the month, one good way of doing it is to create a task for those hours. And then you can either use time estimated and time tracked. So you put in your 10 hours of estimated time that they have allotted to them, and then you can track time as you go and use up those hours. This one's quite good because it does give you a log of when those hours were entered. You could also just use custom fields. So I've got a number custom field here with my 10 hours. And then as we go, I can increment that. Key point here is that you do have to override it. So it just needs to be correctly entered each time. Okay, I'll go back over a couple of the functions of how I'm getting these things, the number, custom fields, recurring, etc. I'll just go through this list of list types first. Okay, so last up we have requests. And so this is, maybe you don't have a certain agreement in place with your clients. Maybe they just ask for things as they come up. So it could be that they send you an email or they call you up, but they can also just submit it via a form. So at the top here, I've got a form. I've just gone view or add view and then form down here. And I've put in a few questions. So these questions are actually just the task fields over here that I've dragged onto the task. So for example, I've got the task name. And for the task name, I'm going to ask them what they want done. For the task description, I'll just ask them to add a description. I'll ask them when it's required by, and I'll put that as a due date, and then any files that are relevant. So if we were to go to view this form, it's quite a nice, snappy little form that they can submit. Now, because they have their own folder, they have their own form view. So we can share this form with just that one client, and whenever they submit work to this particular form, it'll come into their request list in their folder. So we'll always know who it's for. Okay, and let's go over a few of the things needed to make all of that happen. Cool. Okay. So back up to my internal list, I've got a few different custom fields here. And I've actually added them at a higher level, so they apply to all of my lists. So what I've got is period, and I've got another one for invoicing. So what period does is it allows me to understand how often this task needs to be done. Now I've got a due date that I can put recurring on. For example, this one recurs every month. But it's often good to have a quick and colorful way of seeing that. And this, having it as a custom field, also allows me to group by it. So at the top here, I have group by status, and that defines what these chunks are. So currently, I've got my statuses here, and they're all in the open status. So they all get put into one group. Instead, I can change that to group by custom field, and then period. I'm going to save that. And now I can see all of my ad hoc tasks, my monthly tasks, quarterly, and yearly tasks. Now this is for the entire folder, so it's all these lists combined together, but I could of course go into an individual list and do the same thing. So now I'm seeing just my internal tasks divided out between those periods, which can be really handy. This was suggested by an accounting firm or bookkeeping firm in New Zealand. I think it's a fantastic idea. Okay, awesome. A couple of other things that are going on is, let's dive into recurring tasks for a minute, since we're on that topic. So, for example, this welcome basket, we can add a due date by clicking on this, and let's say the 27th. In order to add recurring, there's simply a set recurring button down here. We can choose how it should recur, either on a closed status or a done status. Right now, I don't have any done statuses. They're simply statuses that are before your closed one that are also marked as being complete in terms of reporting. So for now, I'll ignore that and just leave it as recur when closed. And you can choose daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, periodically, which is a certain number of days after being closed, or custom. And now some of these do have extra options. For example, on daily, you can skip weekends. On monthly, you can choose which day of the month, including the last day of the month. So it's somewhat dynamic. And I think yearly is just straight. Yep. If you do want some more options, go custom. So here we can do, say, every 3 weeks on both Mondays and Wednesdays on that third week. So you can start to get some more options there. I'm going to cancel that one. If you do want to really edit the behavior of the recurring, we do have our old legacy recurring. We've stopped using it, or we stopped recommending it, I suppose. It still works fine because it's very powerful, but also somewhat confusing. So I would suggest looking at the help doc for that if you did want to figure out how to use that, but it allows you some extra options. If you do want to find the help documents, they are under this question mark here and docs and FAQ. And here we can just search for legacy recurring. So I won't go into too much depth in it today, but it's there if you do need it. Awesome. Okay. Now, a few other things that would be good to jump into. Let's just see. I think we've covered all of this here. Now, time estimate and time tracked. These are ClickUps. So one thing that is good to know is if you go into your space here and space settings, you can see which ClickUps are on for this space. Now I have time tracking and time estimates on, which is why I'm able to see them here. If you're not seeing them in your ClickUp, that could be because they're turned off for this space. And there's a few more down here that I have turned off. Now I wanted to point out automations. So all levels in ClickUp have automations. Obviously, the higher tier plans can use more actions. Now, they can be really useful in any workflow. In particular, for this requests one, I've added an automation here. Now, first of all, it's going to always assign new tasks to Shane so that when the work requests come in from clients, they're not just getting lost. So as soon as a work request comes in from a client, it gets automatically assigned to Shane. And if I wanted someone else to be notified about it, I could add them as a watcher as well. For example, I might want to know about it, so I'll be added as a watcher on that task. Now that means that Shane and I will both get a notification, and so that task is we're going to be aware of it and start to move through responses to it. I can also go into add automation here and see some other things that I can add and do. Cool. So I was just checking out some questions here just to make sure that everything's going as needed. Looks like it is. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch of recipes for things that can happen automatically. So for example, when a task is created, then we can archive that task. Or when all subtasks are resolved, create a new task. There's lots of things you can do here. Just pick whichever one suits you, or you can go add custom automation to make your own. Now what I've got here is actually just my 2 active automations here. I thought I had another example, but that's all right. I think it's on a different list. It might be in finance team actually, so we'll dive into that shortly. What I did want to show you though is an example of how this is all put together. I've got my ABC limited firm here. So for them, I've got my internal list, and it's again divided out between period, so I can quickly see when things need to be happening. I've got an onboarding list. This is to get when they came in as a new client, to get them on board with all of our processes, systems. There can be quite a lot in that these days, particularly just checking out where their systems are at, anti-money laundering, all that sort of stuff. Can end up being quite an in-depth checklist. So this is a great place to have that and just check it all off. Once it's done, you may not need to hold on to this list. You may be able to just archive it. Archive it will mean it's no longer visible and it's not in your way, but it's still there. You can search for those tasks, and at any time, you can go up to the sidebar settings and say show archived, and they're all still there, and you can still get to it. You can see I've got a lot of archived spaces there as well. Okay, next up, we've got a few services. So for them, I'm doing bookkeeping, advisory, and tax returns. So I've got one extra field that I didn't talk about earlier, and that's the invoicing field. So what I'm doing with the invoicing field, and I might jump up to the folder level here and then add the invoicing field. So invoicing, for any task, I will mark it as either non-billable. So for example, an internal task, I'm not going to charge them for it, unbilled or billed. And for me, billed means I put it on an invoice. So I've got quite a few unbilled tasks here, And once I've added them to an invoice, I'll mark them as billed, and I know that I don't need to worry about billing these again in the future. It's done. I've also got 3 extra values, and that's invoice, sent invoice, and paid invoice. So certain tasks, usually in my internal list, are just invoices. And these ones I will mark as an invoice to say that it needs to be done. Once I've sent it, I'll mark it as sent, and once it's paid, I'll mark it as paid. Now this task is recurring every month. So we can see here it's recurring monthly on the last day of the month. What I do want to do is create a new task. That way, each time a new task is made, I can mark that one separately as invoice, sent, or paid. Just in case a couple of months do end up getting backed up, I don't want the same task to just be moving back a month. I want to see a new task so I can have separate information. Okay, so that's what's going on there. And for my bookkeeping, I'm doing time estimates. This might just be, so you could use this either for what you've quoted the client and then use time tracking for billing. If you have a billing system that's separate, maybe you're just billing for the job being done rather than time spent. This could just be an internal system for just tracking your own efficiency and making sure you're getting through things. I've got my columns here of assignee, due date, priority. This is just to help us internally know who's doing it, when it needs to be done by, and if we maybe need to adjust and try and get it done earlier for some reason, you could use priority. Priority is a ClickUp, you can turn it off. Cool. Advisory and tax returns are much the same. Now you see this one, actually no, it's got the same. I just haven't added a period here. So reporting tax returns, let's say we're going to do that monthly. And then the last one is tickets. So this is my kind of work request type list where they can put items in directly from the form. Now what you want to use this for might change. So for example, you could have it just purely be work requests where they ask you to do new things, or you could have it as say software support. So if you're helping them with a certain accounting software, maybe they need help with it, and you could have a list specifically for that. So every time they have a kind of like a help ticket for that software, they can ask you the question here, and then you can see it and kind of move it through statuses if you have a process that needs to go through, assign it to whoever needs to see it. Okay, so that's my basic layout for working with clients for accounting, bookkeeping, advisory, anyone who's dealing with individual clients. One thing I will show as well before we move on is dashboards. So in my dashboards here, I've got a few dashboards set up. The first one is a client portal, and this is something that I would make and then show to or share with a particular client, and it's just to help them get onboarded in ClickUp. So I might have a video. This one I've just linked our dashboards video. You could, of course, record your own video specific to their setup and the way you want them to do things. I've got a text widget. By the way, all these widgets in dashboards can be added up here. So for example, that video one was a YouTube embed widget. Next up is a text block. I also got a chat and a task list. And widgets can be dragged and dropped, moved around, and also resized. You can kind of set this up how you wish. So I've got this text widget that kind of welcomes them, lets them know a few things, and then straight away gets them to take a few tasks that, or take a few actions rather, that I need them to get done. They've got a chat widget here, so they can ask me questions if they wish. And they've got a task list widget. And this is showing only tasks in their particular location. So in this case, it's their client one folder. So they're only seeing their own tasks, no one else's. There's a double check for that. So even if you did accidentally share a different client's list with them in this widget, they would not see any tasks that haven't been shared with them. So even if you accidentally click the wrong location for this widget, they're not going to see anything that's not shared with them. And then down the bottom, I've actually just embedded that work request form. So that's just done via a custom embed. And then I've put in the sharing link to our form. So you can see here the link that I've gotten there. To get that link, we can just go to any form view. So up here we've got work request, and we've got share form, and we've got the embed code or just the direct link. And both will work for our dashboards. Awesome. So that's to help a client get onboarded. You could use it for ongoing work if you just manage not too much within this task list widget. You could kind of use this as their main place to look in ClickUp, although it can, if they are doing more work, it can be useful to teach them how to use list view. The other thing I've got is client management. Now this is for me to help manage all my clients and see where things are at. So I've got a few different types of widgets. I've got the portfolio widget, task list widget again, and then I've got a custom pie chart. If you are on the unlimited plan, you won't be able to access that one, but there are various pie charts that will be available to you. Yeah. Cool. So this is the portfolio widget at the top here. And this one, all you really need to do is just select which list or folders you want to show. I'm showing folders because a folder is a client in my particular space. And I can simply see, all the statuses in that folder, the progress of work, how much is completed, and if anything is overdue. So it gives me just a high-level view of what I need to be looking at for that client. I've got overdue tasks specifically down here. It looks like none are overdue currently. So I'm just showing any tasks in my space. I'm going to group them by due date, including subtasks. Actually, I'm not going to show closed. That shouldn't be necessary. And I will show task locations, just so I can tell them apart, which client they're coming from. And I'm filtering where the due date is today or earlier. So either it's overdue or it's due today. Now, I'm doing this currently for all of my clients mixed together. So instead of kind of filtering down to one client's area or location folder, I'm showing all of them. Now you could do this. You could also just make individual dashboards, one from each client. So you can kind of drill down and just see that client's data. And you could also do both. You could have one that's an overview and then one for each client as well. Now I've got some graphs over the side, and this just helps me understand. This first one is how many tasks are happening how often. So for example, I've got 10 ad hoc tasks, 9 that are monthly, 5 that are yearly, and 2 that are quarterly. Just so I can kind of see what the work repetition looks like. I've also got my billing status. So out of all my tasks, and this is only including, I've got it set up to say that group by, which is what dictates the colors, is done by the invoicing custom field. And it only shows non-billable, unbilled, and billed. So I'm not looking at my invoices, just here. So out of all my tasks, I've got 15 that are unbilled, 1 that's billed, and 9 that are non-billable. So obviously I need to catch up and start putting some invoices together. I've also got the statuses of my invoices. So that's just the reverse. I've done the same thing. I've picked my location and chosen my grouping as the invoicing custom field, and then just selected the other 3 options. So I've currently got, looks like 2 invoices. One of them needs to be done. The other one has been sent and is awaiting payment. Cool. So this is a very basic kind of client management dashboard. You are free, obviously, to add whatever other widgets you would like to kind of fill it out and make it specific to you. But this would be a really great place to start. Okay. Now, if you do have any more questions about dealing with clients, do chuck them into the Q&A and we can follow up any questions at the end. It looks like we've got a lot of questions about automation going on, so we'll cover those. I am now going to jump into the finance team side of things though. So this will be useful for anyone, CFO, finance team, typically working for a larger company. Okay. Now, in this case, there's lots of different functions. So I've just kind of mapped out a few functions that will hopefully give you a bit of an idea. So first of all, I've got an approval process. Now, you can do this with, say, invoices, if you're invoicing a client. So it needs to get approval before you send the invoice to the client. Or you can do it for, purchase requests, requests to spend money on things. So I'll jump into my invoices one. So first of all, I've got the assignee who's making this invoice. I've got a file custom field here that actually allows me to attach the invoice itself. And if I were to click on that, we'd be able to see that invoice. And this is just a blank one. I've also got the amount of the invoice, and I've used a formula custom field to calculate any discount. So here I've got a discount % field, and this is just a number custom field. So it just allows me to enter in the percent, so number custom field. And then the last one, or this total one here, is a formula. So if I click on this, now there's kind of simple and advanced formulas. So what I could do is multiply, add, subtract, or divide these two fields. But I want to do something slightly more advanced than that, so I'm going to the advanced one. And what I've just said is I've clicked on, let's redo it actually. So let's go amount, and now I've forgotten my formula. So I needed to divide this one by the remainder of that one. So this one, I'm going to go times, and then 1 minus my discount percentage, and that discount percentage has to be divided by 100. So it becomes a percentage. All right. So you can see you kind of click on these things. You can just use, the star for times, slash for divide, and then plus and minus on your keyboard. And there are also a bunch of more advanced functions down here if you do need them. I'll hit calculate. So this amount is the same. This amount is being reduced by 15%. This amount is being reduced by 10%. So that can be helpful. The due date for me is the date that this invoice needs to be sent. So it's the time that the reviewer needs to do it by. And then any comments about this invoice. For example, this one had a charge added for an out of hours request. Now, one thing that's really neat here is if we do go into this task and open this invoice, we can actually add comments. So for example, if we say, okay, this item, please remove this. And it was, I think, Leslie doing this invoice. So we'll assign that comment to her. And it will pop up over here. She'll get a notification about this. You'll be able to come in here, see where the point is, the pin that's dropped, reply to this comment, and then mark it as resolved. So we can go through and just kind of, do this about the various parts of this invoice to adjust it as needed. You can also zoom out up the top here if wished. So that can be really useful as part of this kind of invoice proofing process as well. And obviously you have your regular comments about the whole task. Okay, anything else here? Yes, we have some automation. So first of all, we've got some statuses here. And if you do want to edit your statuses, it can be done via these kind of context menus at each level. If you set statuses for the whole space, then everything below it will inherit it unless you set specific ones for a folder. If you set specific ones for the folder, the lists within that folder will inherit it unless you set specific ones for that list. So if I go into my 3 dots here and edit list statuses, we can see I've got custom ones just for this list. So I've got draft, for review, changes needed. Approved is a done status. So anything in the approved status will be considered done for reporting. And then our closed status is issued. And you can move these around, rename them, recolor them, all that good stuff. Okay, so what happens is an invoice comes in as a draft. We mark it as for review. And then once the reviewer has a chance to look at it, they'll either mark it as change needed or approved. Now you might just notice that these assignees changed. I got added as a reviewer, or I just got added. So the reason I got added is I have 2 automations happening here. So I've got an automation that says when status changes to for review, add the assignee, and that's me. So I'm the reviewer for these invoices, or approver. And then when the status changes to changes needed, then remove the assignee, me. So what that means is that anytime someone says something's for review, it will also get assigned to, oh, this one didn't work because it was already assigned to me. So normally I wouldn't submit an invoice to myself. So let's say this was someone else. We'll do Willow, and then it gets marked for review. Then because I'm the approver, I'll get added to this task. Now I get to look at it. If I say, actually, no, I've marked up this PDF, given him some things that he needs to change, then I'll say changes needed. Now, because it's changes needed, I no longer need to be involved in it until it's ready for review again. So I get taken off. He makes the changes, he puts it back in review. Once it's back in review, I'll get added as a reviewer again. Now, what you could do is take Willow off. The problem then is that when you put it back into changes needed, the system, it's very hard to specify who it should be assigned to. I could make an automation that says, assign it to this person when it goes into changes needed, but I need to know who that person is. And so it's easier to just leave him on and add me as an extra assignee. So Yeah, okay, let's go through this one in a little bit more depth just because there are some questions about automation. So this is, okay, let's start on a new one actually. So I often like to start with custom automation. I just like having a blank slate. So you can choose your trigger. Now, when should something happen? In this case, it's on a status change. We don't care which status it comes from, which status it was beforehand. We care that it's been moved to a status, and that one is for review. So from any to for review. Great, that's our trigger. When that happens, we can choose an action. So we might want to say change assignee to. And we've got an advanced option here. So we can just add, just remove, or reassign. And reassign means remove all and assign these people. So in our case, we wanted to just add me, and the other automation was doing the opposite thing. It was just removing me, but leaving whoever else was on there alone. That's really as simple as it is. Automation is actually very, very simple. You can, I guess, do a few more advanced things in that maybe you only want it to trigger. So for example, if we were to say we want to go to the status changes needed, we might want this to only trigger when it comes from the status for review. So if it gets moved to or marked as changes needed from draft, this will not trigger. It'll only ever trigger when it goes from this one to that one. Another thing you can do is add a condition. So it'll only trigger if this is true. So for example, only use this automation if the assignee is any of, let's say, Amy and Shane. So it'll only trigger on tasks where the assignee is either Amy or Shane. And then we hit create, and that's done. I do need to add an assignee here though, so let's go me. And that's it. You can see that they're on here. You can turn them off, delete them, or go back in and edit them again. Maybe one other thing I didn't mention is you can have multiple actions. So you can change the assignee and then also maybe add a comment. And you can say mention, oops, not typing. Interesting. I think that is an issue with my keyboard perhaps. Anyway, you get the idea. So you can type your comment in here. You can use mentions, task mentions. You can assign it to someone, all your regular things. Okay, automation, awesome. And then same kind of basic idea for invoices as for spend. You can, add a new task here for some sort of request. So for example, I'm currently asking for a budget for project X, and maybe who's asking for that should be here, the due date of when it needs to be approved by, the amount we're kind of estimating it's going to cost, and the type of thing it is. So it might be a project, equipment, overtime, marketing, client spend, whatever else. And you can add that just with a drop-down custom field here. Now this might be a good one to add a form view on. Maybe you don't want people adding tasks directly to this list. Maybe you can just have a form that's kind of available to the company and anyone can submit that. And then the only people who need to actually see the list are the approvers. Cool. Sweet. Let's move on to accounts. So here I've got accounts payable and receivable. And this is basically just tracking, who has money owing and who do we have money owing to. So as invoices, come in or go out, they'd be added to this list. And quite simply, we've got the due date to know when the money is due, how much. I've got a formula field here to just add 20% VAT. The contact that we need to pay, the method, and the invoice number. I'll probably attach a file custom field here with the invoice as well, just so you always have it. Oops. So that just warned us that we already have a field called invoice. And it's good to reuse the same field so you don't end up with multiple fields with the same name. So what I've done to add that is I've gone to add column, gone down to the bottom to existing fields, found my files field, and it's not there because probably it's already on this list and I just didn't pay attention. Yeah, there we go. So it's already there. Cool, and it's already got invoices for all these tasks as well, actually. So perfect, that looks really good. Same thing for accounts receivable. So when we send an invoice out, we'll say who it's for, the due date, amount owed with that, contact, payment method, and invoice number. and we'll add the invoice field there as well. Awesome. If you do have any more questions about that, we'll cover them at the end. I'll just keep moving through here. Okay, in terms of budgeting and forecasts, there's lots of different ways of doing this. So one way is to simply say, okay, we've got budgeting and forecast to do. Let's just make tasks for what we need to get done. So we've got a task for complete this budget, a task for adjust this forecast, and you can just do it like a regular kind of work management, project management style system. You assign who needs to do it, when they need to do it by, mark it done, collaborate on it, all your normal stuff. Alternatively, if you do want to have the numbers themselves inside of ClickUp, you could make a list where each task is some sort of either revenue or expense. So you're actually kind of calculating it. So in this case, I've got projected revenue. I've got this is a currency custom field. So down here, we've got, money custom field. And I've got my amounts in there. This is set, if we go into edit to US dollars, you can choose your local currency, particularly if it has a different symbol. For the spend, I've just included a minus sign in front of it, and that makes it negative. I've got my period custom field here, and that just tells us kind of, you wouldn't want to mix periods. So if you did have multiple periods, you'd definitely want to group them by year, just so you're not adding a yearly amount to a monthly amount. That would be a bit strange. Probably what you'd do is you'd say, sales and marketing, edit the name and go like, dash monthly. Just make it clear that this whole list is monthly. But if you do want to mix them, as long as you keep the grouping separately, that would be fine. And then what I've also done is you click on the title, the header of the column, and calculate. And I've done the sum here, hit calculate, and now for each group, you'll see the sum of this amount. So I've got 400,000 revenue, minus 80,000 ad budget, minus 200,000 project overheads, and I've got my total profit at the bottom there. I've also got a formula custom field. It's just multiplying it by 12 to get an annualized amount. Cool. I've also had some suggestions, some great suggestions for using this to manage OPEX and CAPEX. And this is just as simple as adding a line for each monthly charge. So for example, it's very common to have monthly charges for something like an accounting platform, Xero or QuickBooks. There are often a bunch of other services, and it can be hard to keep track of all your monthly charges. So having an OPEX list where you just list each one of those out, how much it is, and the period that it is paid can be very helpful to just keep track of that. And same thing can be done with CAPEX. So capital expenditure. For reports, very similar. Oftentimes a big part for finance teams is to generate statements, monthly reports, financial analysis. I would guess you're going to be doing that in a different software. There's probably some sort of reporting software or even just documents. You can, of course, always use ClickUp Docs to do that, or just embed an actual doc as well, such as a Google Doc. So it's all in one place still, but how you do that is up to you. So here I've just got tasks for each type of thing that needs to get done, when it needs to get done, and these ones are recurring because they need to be done every month. One good thing to point out is that you can do embedding for Google Docs and particularly Google Sheets if you do want spreadsheets. Let's just find where I have it. I think it was actually client work, ABC Limited. Yeah, here. So for this client, I've actually got their profit and loss sheet. And so this is just a Google Sheet that's been embedded. You can go in here and go edit code and just paste in the sharing URL. So in Google Sheets, you go share and then get the sharing link, and that's what you'll paste in. That sharing link doesn't have to be public to everyone. It can be just private to whoever has the link, and then just don't share the link with anyone, and you're fine. So here I've got my sheet. I can jump between my different tabs and then set up anything I need to, and have that all within ClickUp without having to go and find it each time. I've also got some notes here just about this client. For example, I've got meeting notes, the logins for any of their accounts. You could also have, it might be great to have a setup instructions for the different softwares so that they get access to that when they are shared with this folder. Cool. Okay, that is the majority of what I'm covering today. So I'm going to start to head into questions. It looks like we've got about 20 minutes left, so that's about right. Okay, let me just have a look through here. Okay, so we had lots of automation questions. We've covered that a little bit. I can go over it more if we need. Okay, client-facing workflows. Okay. So what might be useful to see is how a client would see this. So I've got a guest account in here. Let's just double check that we're sharing all the right things. So client portal, we definitely want them to see that. So we'll go up here to share, and yes, my guest is on there. And we need to make sure they've shared this list. So this one is client one. Let's switch that to be ABC Limited. And we need to remove this one. Okay, and now let's make sure that they're actually shared with ABC Limited, so that will pop up for them. If they can see a dashboard widget with data that they don't have permission to, it will just show up as blank. That security device is in there. So we'll go sharing and permissions on this folder, and then we'll invite that guest. Okay, great. So they're now shared to a dashboard and probably some other stuff from earlier on, and then also this list. Oh, sorry, this particular folder. Okay, so I'll log out here and then just log in as that guest. Okay, so they have access to specific things they're shared to. So in the past, it looks like I've shared a couple of other folders, a list here, another folder here, and then my ABC Limited list. So they can see that. I gave them full permissions, so they can comment, edit things, change the names. They can even add new tasks because they have full permissions. We could stop them from creating new tasks and only allow them to edit, stop them from editing and only allow them to comment, or stop them from doing anything and they can only see it as read-only. They can still access the views that exist. Creating new views will stop them, just so they can't mess up the functionality. They can create private views though, if they do want their own ones. And the key thing is they can go into dashboards and see that dashboard that you've nicely set up for them. They can't obviously edit the settings in there. Cool, so that's pretty much the workflow from the client side. So it's very similar, it's just kind of constricted to just what they need to see. Okay, I'm gonna jump back into my main account here. Okay, Caroline said, thank goodness this info will be available on a recording. My brain is spinning in a good way. Awesome, glad to hear it. Okay. Now, let's go through some questions. So, yes, okay. First question, is integrating with QBO something that could be done? Adding these invoices when using QBO seems redundant. Yep, good question. So, I think that was particularly in reference to, actually, I'm not entirely sure what that was in reference to. Maybe this one for approval. So yeah, if you're doing approval process outside of ClickUp, it may not be useful duplicating that effort. It might be probably the most useful for kind of smaller teams that haven't, it's not worth investing in a full-blown accounting software. If you do have an accounting software, you're more likely to be only tracking tasks within ClickUp and just action items. In terms of integrating, yes, it's possible right now via Zapier. We also have direct integrations coming with QuickBooks and Xero, and they're coming very soon. I don't have the exact scope of that, but yeah, there'll be some interesting things possible. Okay, next question. Use case I'd like to see: referral management, inbound, outbound, internal, external, cross referrals. Referral management. I'm kind of wondering who's referring. Do you mean someone's referred them to you, or you're referring them to someone else? I guess both. I might ponder that one and come back to it. I'm not 100% sure what you're meaning there. On some tasks, on tasks that occur, is it possible when it recurs to come up with a checklist unchecked? Good question. Okay. Yep, let's have a go at that. So I'm going to pick something simple. So I've got a task here. Let's create a subtask. Now the general answer is yes, but it depends how you set it up. So I'm just going to create a checklist called checklist. We'll have it item 1, item 2. We're going to mark these off, and we'll go back to the parent task. So we want this parent task to recur. And let's say daily when closed. Great. Now, if you were to leave it without creating a new task, what it's essentially going to do is just move this task along. And so if we were to mark that complete, it's going to open subtask. That's why it's saying that. That's fine. Continue anyway. And it's recurred. It's now due tomorrow. But nothing has changed. All the details inside of it are exactly the same because it's the same task, including the subtask and all its items. So let's change that instead. So let's say this is recurring and creating a new task. Okay, now if I were to mark it off again, I'm going to resolve all items as well. Then it's going to pop up with a new task. I can still see that old show task, closed task there by clicking show tasks. So that one is done, and now I've got a new one. And on this new one, we'll see that our subtask is not done, and our checklist items are not done. So that would be the way to go about that. Okay, workloads. I'm keen to learn more about workloads so that when I am all set up, I can see capacity for my staff myself to know how we are tracking with work for the month and what scope I have to increase new clients. Yep, good question. So what we have right now is the box view that kind of tracks workload. So you can see for each person how many tasks are assigned to them and done, and you can see either number of tasks, time estimate, or points if you're using like Scrum points. You can see what those tasks are and get a little diagram of how far through they are, and also you'll get a bar chart of each person. Now, key thing with this is it doesn't necessarily tell you when these tasks are happening. You can go into them and see, obviously, but this kind of just pulls in data for all time. Now, what would also be good is the ability to see when tasks are scheduled and how busy a person is on a particular day or in a particular week. That feature we call workload, and it's coming soon. So look forward to that one. Okay, use case. I can show how I do my monthly bookkeeping process. I place each action as a task, and as the items are performed, I move it along the status per month. That sounds good. I'm not quite sure what the question is there. I can show how I do my monthly booking process. Okay, that might have just been a message to everyone else. Let me know if there's anything that you actually want me to answer. Use case, tax preparation. That is a little bit too broad for me. So someone else has jumped in there and said, I have a separate list for tax, create a task for each return and tag for easy search. It depends what you're trying to achieve. So are you tracking multiple tax returns? They sound like tasks. You just mark them as done. Yeah, I need some more information in terms of what issues you're running into that aren't being solved by just adding tasks and then moving them through statuses. Because I think you could talk to people in your team about the various information. You can maybe even share it with the client and have a checklist for things the client still needs to get to you, outstanding documentation. The client can attach documents there if that's the route you're going. Or, if you don't want to share them into your ClickUp, you can just email them and say, hey, here are the things you need to give me still. And kind of just manage the status and then mark it done or in its various statuses as it is. That sounds fairly functional to me. office management of CA and CPA. I won't go over that in this webinar because it's probably more to do with just general management. But what I will suggest is on any space, you can go into templates here and you can see both list templates and folder templates. And if you go up to ClickUp up here, you can see ones that we've created. And I believe there's one for office space management. That might not be exactly what you're asking for, actually. Let's just have a look at that. Doop-de-doo. I think it's a little bit slower because it's a new list. Or it's my internet. Okay, while that's loading, let's just go to the next one. Okay, I have tasks as recurring and a custom field called work month. Okay, I want it to recur and update the work month to show the month that the work is being done in. Yeah, that's a little bit tricky. You kind of set yourself up with, I can see why it's useful, but it's just going to be annoying to map that. So let's just jump into client work for a second. So instead of doing, period here, you've got like, January, February, March, April, May. And so when you mark it complete, you want to set an automation to say, so what's the trigger here? So it's not even when you do a trigger, it's when a new task is created. So a new task is created, and you want it to change the custom field value, which we can do, set custom field period to a certain value. But you want that value to be based on essentially when it's recurring. So yes, this is actually possible. I'm tempted to say there might be a better way to structure it, but the way it's possible, which is not particularly fun, is that you need to specify a value. So you can specify January, and then you can set up the trigger for January. So you'd have a condition of, the due date is in the range. This is going to have to be reset every year because each year is a different range. And we don't currently have range. We're currently doing it just by general. So it can be greater than, equal to. We don't currently have a between. This is going to be really annoying to set. And I think potentially not possible right now because we don't have. So what you do is like between the start of January and the end of January, and then mark it as January. And you have a second automation between blah, 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 set it to February. And it would be a pain to set up, but it would work. But I don't think we can do that. Actually, okay, you could do that. You could say it's less than, the end of January. Where's January? Okay, and then a second condition of due date is greater than 1st of January. Okay, I would definitely question, do you need to do it this way? Would it not be better to just have this kind of monthly thing? Do be aware you can group by due date, and it's going to automatically kind of divide things out. It won't be into months. It will be, today, tomorrow, next week, that kind of thing. But yeah, doing it on a new task is going to be tricky. But if you want to do it, that's how it's potentially possible. Okay, let's just jump back into that last question about office space management. I think this template just doesn't like me. Okay, we'll figure out what's going on there later. But I think that one was more to do with managing like office space for hire anyway. So in terms of office space management, again, it depends what you want to do. Probably you have a bunch of tasks that need to occur on certain times, maybe each month. So I just add them as tasks, due dates, assignees. If you need anything outside of that, I probably need more information. But just the basic workflow of ClickUp is going to do a decent job of that. There might also be something to do with flow of documents through a CPA office. I'm not a CPA myself. I probably don't have I'd need more information to answer that for you. Okay, we've only got a few more minutes. I'm just going to quickly jump through and see if I can find some particularly common questions. Okay, how do I put a note on a future occurrence? For example, a future payroll I need to remember to reimburse John Smith for $100. So future occurrences don't actually exist yet. So for example, let's find a recurring task, or we can just make one. So we'll set this recurring to next week. Now, that's an action that's going to happen. It hasn't happened yet, so that task doesn't exist. Now, if you're just moving the due dates and not creating a new task, you can simply leave the comment on this task, and it will move when the task gets its due dates moved along. It'll stay with it. For a new task, obviously, it's not going to have that comment. There are technically ways of doing that, but it's probably more involved than you really want. If you went create new task, you can go into options and include comments, but it's going to copy them off the first one. Yeah, it's doable with legacy recurring, but I don't think that's the way you want to do it. I would be tempted to just trigger the recurrence early, mark it as closed, have the next one pop up, and then move it back to whatever status it's in, and then put the note in the new one. Or just hit R on your keyboard and make yourself a reminder. That might be better, and you can just give yourself a due date of when you need to remember to do that. Other ways to connect, let's say, the invoicing field via API to an accounting or invoicing system through API. Yes, definitely. If you go to ClickUp API, I'm just going to search it. You'll be able to see all of our API documentation, and it's very flexible. You can, if you know how to use APIs, there's a lot you can do there with lots of different endpoints, I suppose is the right word. Okay, can you show what could be client facing? Okay, so forms can be outside of ClickUp. So that can be to anyone, anywhere. You can just put them on a website, send them an email. Guests, what I showed you earlier, the client-facing guest thing, is when you actually add someone to a location as a guest. So for example, if I wanted to add them to this folder, sharing and permissions, and I can add someone either existing or someone new via email here. So guest is kind of like they're in ClickUp, but they don't have full rights, whereas some things are shareable publicly. For example, I can share a list view publicly. I can also share a form publicly. Board views can be shared publicly. I think I'm missing one. Might be calendars. So yeah, there's kind of a few differences between public facing there. Okay, we're about out of time, but thank you everyone for coming along and listening. I hope that's been really helpful for you. And if you would like to follow up with any more questions, if you weren't able to get yours answered, do remember we always have chat here for support, and that the customer support team will get back to you as soon as they can.